So yeah, we're Orphan Drift, as well as that Ranu's friend next to her. I can't remember what he's called.
It's Folsom.
Folsom, indeed. So yeah, we're going to talk about our Nine Brains animation, which is a kind of working title, maybe. What do you think? We haven't really talked about that.
Yeah, we don't have a title yet, but that's what it's called for now. It's not a bad title.
No, I'm just thinking that as I say working title.
I think Nine Brains is the title. Okay, it's good. Yeah, where do we want to start? What is this about? So I'm just going to read the description of the project to start. So Nine Brains is an animated speculative fiction that unfolds in 9 chapters. It tells the story of an emergent AI modeled on the cognitive and behavioral tendencies of an octopus. The purpose of this AI is to expand planetary interspecies communications, to open pathways of embodiment, and better understanding how collective and individual entities exchange energy and create power. Basically, to build different imagined futures. So that was what we wrote for the description of the project. And now we're making 9 short animations, each of which are like 2.5 minutes, based on different aspects of octopus biology and the fact that they have a brain in each arm, a central brain that operates those arms. But the idea that each of the arms can operate independently on some
And do so for much of their kind of mapping their life world. It seems the 9th central one only kicks in when there's a decision to be made, or something all of the arms need to focus on. So that is actually quite radical, that there are 8 different simultaneous worldviews going on for most of its waking and probably sleeping life.
Yeah, and that we thought it was a really amazing model for thinking about the collective and the individual and how they are simultaneous, because like we're in such a deep neoliberal moment, and it seems to be getting worse, and there's so much confusion around being an individual and being in a collective at the same time, which of course is where we always are. So
yeah,
it's kind of, using this model of intelligence to try to work out how we can kind of think through the moment that we're in and these problems that come up where how much you have to be both. You have to be both an individual and a collective all the time. And I just feel like humans are having trouble navigating that right now.
It's also a way of thinking or trying to imagine into different kinds of temporality and dimensions of things happening to us simultaneously as well, this octopus model. But could you just quickly say like how shadow time?
Sure. Yeah, so shadow time is a word that I invented with Alicia Escott and the Bureau for Linguistical Reality for creating language around feelings and experiences that we don't have language for yet, due to the changing climate and other kind of big changes that go with that. And so I was part of a salon that they invited me to be in, which had to do with science fiction. And I was thinking at the time about how to describe this feeling. This was in like 2015, the end of 2015. So I was talking about trying to figure out a word for this feeling of living with different time scales, and where we have this duality between on the one hand, we have still these regular kind of ambitions or everyday problems, and we also are living in a time where it feels like the way of life is totally unsustainable, and that there's going to be these like very vast changes, and how to kind of understand that that's what's happening to us. We're being kind of connected to two completely different senses of time. I would say probably more than two. And shadow time is the word we developed for that. And so it started to take on this a whole bunch of other meanings about, just the rise of isolationism globally, and the way that, the political sphere, it kind of connects with the sphere of climate change and ecological change, and then how that impacts all kinds of things such as migration and the plight of lots of peoples on the planet. And so,
and non-human life.
yeah, and non-human life. So seeing that kind of like political dimension, which is kind of reactively trying to hold back power, sort of become one response that is happening that kind of endangers us all further, I would say. So anyway, shadow time was a word that I invented back then, but it now feels like we're sort of totally in it in a way.
Exactly. That's why I just thought it was worth sharing that, because for me as well, this work we've been doing with Octopus over quite a few years now has different tones or focuses. We were really worrying about, the kind of surveillance marketing tendencies of AI, and how thinking with a different kind of distributed consciousness and really immersing in it, how it might think and be in its life world, was something kind of directly between the octopus and the AI,
Right.
sort of models of consciousness. But this work, because we've lived through COVID and all the things you've talked about, and the uncertainty and the different concertinaing of different kinds of temporality and fear and anxiety and protection, and also community. Like when you're talking about being individual and collective, there's also this sense of community being really important, and finding new ways of being in community, and with what, like community across species, and like redefining community and communication. And like this piece that we're going on the journey with you guys during this residency feels like it's trying to look at some of the ways we see Octopus doing things differently from us, and how we can maybe imagine that, speculate on that into human community, or how we as a species could be.
It's also like creating this non-human protagonist, which is like these different brains. So it's a speculative fiction in that sense, that we're using like having these different brains be of an octopus be a protagonist for telling a story about what would happen if AI was modeled differently, or was like unfolding in the world differently. We working across continents, we work across continents, but we've been working together for a long time, which we talked about a little bit in the other introduction. And then we send each other a lot of footage. So we'll talk through in this series, each month. We will talk through our process for thinking about one of the arms. But the way that we'll put things together in the animations is to send each other clips, or images. It's like hard to describe how we work. We send each other a lot of footage, and then we each do things with that, and then they come back together. And so in a way, we're working with like a collective bank of material. And
Absolutely, that's so key.
Bringing different aesthetic languages together, which is the sort of also this. I think that our whole way of working is also an example of this individual and collective brain thing. So this is like a really, it's kind of like a meta project, because it sort of also describes in itself the way we've been working for a long time.
So yeah, we shall we go through so we've got these 8 attributes, ways of perceiving or being, and then that Ranu's put into a diagram, which I'm just going to share here now.
Yeah, so this is a diagram of the structure of the project that we're going to be developing this year, and this diagram shows the different arms that we're working with based on the properties of this creature. So, for instance, one of the things says protect. So when we think about that, we think about the way the octopus might do that. What are the physical ways that octopus protect? But we are also thinking about what protection means in our world right now.
And then thinking about how the octopus has fear or anxiety and responds to pressure, like a lot of the information an octopus receives in the world is through pressure, you know, like waves, strong waves, surges, ebbs and flows, movements of large predators. Like part of it is registered chemically, and a lot of it's pressure. So it's thinking about, in a way, more for us to retune to more kind of multimodal ways of sensing. Like we're so vision led in Western culture, and to register things that we need to be really wary of, and in the world to kind of feel them with lots of senses, like be really awake, I suppose, to stuff that might be touching you, or I don't know. I think that can be quite abstract, that word pressure, as well as very physical. I think of all of these as both sort of conceptual or method building and physically experienced. I don't know.
Yeah, that's really important. I mean, I think like this idea of the intellect and the physical being simultaneous has been with us for a really long time, and this is kind of like I think it's an insistence that we don't lose the body in all of this, and that the dimension of physical perception, physical intellectual and emotional perception are simultaneous, and those tools need to all be at our fingertips or whatever, or be accounted for. And I think there's a whole bunch of things about the octopus biology whereby the arms they see and touch and feed, or they're like at the same time. So that's sort of a big part of what makes this particular creature so interesting in terms of thinking about how something like AI could develop, because there's so many of the applications feel like they're just colonizing our time, colonizing our identities. The colonizing tendencies of AI right now, I find are really extreme. And so this is sort of kind of like work our way into thinking in other directions for the development of all of this.
So yes, this is a absolutely kind of multiversal response to being in the world. If you're doing all of these things simultaneously and kind of processing them experientially simultaneously as well. I mean, we're going to talk about each of these arms in much more detail. So each drop, we're going to focus on one of these arms, and also on the balancing, coordinating, central sensory data processing, central brain as well.
Yeah, and we're building each one by talking through like the tendencies of the octopus, what an AI might be like if it had those tendencies, and what is it in the world that like needs these mechanisms, right? Like what do we associate with these things right now? That's kind of how we build. So one of these animations is already finished, and so we'll focus on that one in the next month. That one is the claustrophobia arm. And so we can talk about how we made that and how we came to those decisions. And it was made in the middle of the pandemic. So we started with that one specifically because of the situation that we were both in really different places. You being in South Africa and me being in San Francisco.
Yeah, it's been really interesting being locked down in a southern hemisphere country, because the blatant racisms of the northern countries has been quite, I knew it's been really radical. So that's something that will be in the difference. And Ranu's experience in the United States of Trump, like all these things that we've experienced in that kind of broader socio-political environment will be in things somehow, along with the intimacies and the tenderness and the loss and the grief and for me, like being in the ocean a lot, because I'm by the ocean near Cape Town. Yeah, I want to try and imagine into with hope rather than feeling so overwhelmed with being kind of trapped in this neoliberal swamping.
I think
I
it's
wonder
what you're saying about the being in the southern hemisphere, and I wonder if the trick bait and switch arm can connect to that somehow, like this sort of idea of being told, having on the one hand this this sort of idealization of the global, and then at the same time having the kind of the inequity be so clear.
Yeah, excellent. We'll be writing that in our notes.
Bait and switch.
Yeah. But then another thing that I was just thinking we might want to tell everyone is that each of the animations will have a visual aesthetic, and that is something we've been talking about already a bit, which we'll be explaining in each of the drops. But yeah, an aesthetic that is also quite common for us with our work is the aesthetics are almost like a kind of character. The aesthetics they have great purpose. I know aesthetic always does, but they really matter. The aesthetics and the editing, the speed, the rhythm, as well as the content of our work for us, of audiovisual work. So we want to translate the condition that each arm is navigating through the aesthetics. So
yeah,
and it might include text, words that are physically appropriate to a specific aesthetic. We want to kind of achieve an arm-specific language, which we're working out. The last thing for me is to just quickly mention the time ribbons.
Yes, the time ribbons. That's what I was.
Would you say a little about why we called them that?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about wanting to figure out a way that the series of animations, because they will all have be speaking a slightly different language. With the aesthetic decisions that we're making for each piece, we wanted to think about something that could define the whole series as a series, like they're all part of the same body, and thinking about time and the temporality of a body, of one body, was one way to do that, to think about, because we're working in a time-based medium, and animation has kind of like a time signature. And so we wanted to kind of make that visible. And so we're working with this ribbon, which is a color ripple that connects to the time signature of the video, but that kind of runs through each piece so that it's kind of like it's like if I imagine being in a virtual reality or in some sort of environment that you're not sure about, and there's like one thing that that grounds you in your body. It's that thing, it's that mechanism. Each time ribbon will also appear in the central brain. So the central brain incorporates all of the 8 time ribbons from the different arms, so that that one will also be identifiable as the kind of central brain.
All of those being together simultaneously is going to be really interesting, hopefully, as a visual experience of this multiplicity, simultaneous, different moods and energies and experiences going on. So the way they come together is going to be, yeah, really interesting. And it just reminds me of this. Have you read Children of Ruin, Ranu? So it's this. It's this book by this science fiction writer called Adrian Tchaikovsky. Is that in Mirror? Is that the wrong way around?
No.
Okay. So it's about spacefaring octopuses that accidentally got lost in VR by some scientist up in space, but there's like hundreds of years after they've been evolving on their own, a human spaceship manned vehicle goes to investigate, and they start trying to communicate with the octopuses on iPads, because the octopus seem to shoot these holographic shards of color and light at each other. That's totally confusing for the humans, because it's all contradictory. They think for a minute they might be getting a mood, but then it changes in a second, and there's like hundreds of octopuses, all of them with their 8 arms, all shooting colors around, and the humans can't really cope, and neither can the iPads. But that just reminded me, when you're describing the way the time ribbons will come together in the 9th brain, that's like making me laugh slightly, that is, we're going to create a very immersive and generous version of the mayhem that's in Children of Ruin.
Put it on my
Anyway.
radar. Well, that seems good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll see you next time. And we're going to start in claustrophobia.
Yes.
So,
Indeed.
Happy New Year.